What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're hanging out with my friend Jules Jenssen. I've been wanting to have Jules on the podcast for a long time. If you don't know Jules, he is a drummer, music producer, singer-songwriter, Ableton Live playback engineer, and pretty brilliant at that, if I may say. In the last 10 years, he's played over 1,000 nationwide gigs. He's played with many bands and artists, helping them set up their live playback rigs. He's produced a multi-year music festival, obtained song placements in video games like NBA 2K Playgrounds. He also helped build a radio podcast piece with Jay Allison's Transmute.org. He's also worked with Laura Escude and done playback with Electronic Creatives. They do playback for many famous Platinum Grammy artists that you all know. He also helped manage the entire Transmute educational program founded by Laura, helping artists build their live performance rigs using Ableton. If you are listening to the podcast, I appreciate if you leave a like and a review. If you don't think the podcast sucks, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. And if you want to be the first to get new episodes and free Ableton Live devices and different things I'm sending out in the newsletter, join the newsletter. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Happy to hang out with you there. I really enjoyed this episode with Jules. We nerd out really hard in this episode. So for anybody that's remotely interested in live performance or any kind of weird, crazy routing, Jules is the guy, and we go pretty deep. So enjoy.
Trying to get out there. I will be in LA in a couple weeks for rehearsals for this tour I'm going on doing playback for Benny.
Sick.
Big artist.
I'm not too familiar with Benny, but
I wasn't until they hired me, but she's pretty big. She's got like 6.7 million monthly on Spotify and like 600K on Insta, and got some good, features and stuff like that she does. So,
dude, congrats. That's dope. How did you meet her?
It's all through EC.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Yeah, AJ put me on.
The Laura Grapevine.
Yes,
That's
sir.
Small world, dude. That's actually how we met. So glad to have you on the podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a while, since we met back in the good old Master Track days.
Yes.
Wait, that was like what, 2000?
I was 19, the beginning of 19, I think, right? Or
damn, dude, that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all blurs together. It's crazy. You could almost tell me like
does.
anything in late 2019, 2020, or 2021 happened, and I'd be like, sure, that's when that happened. But
Yeah.
I think it was March
Something like that. Yeah.
2019. Yeah.
There was like, what, 15 of us or so. Did you stay in the Airbnb with all of us?
No,
or
I was
just-
staying with some friends from back home who lived like right down the road from the Harmon
Okay.
Center, which was awesome. So, but I was over there hanging for a couple of the nights with.
Yeah, you did come over a few times. Jeff
Yeah.
Kaler, I remember Jeff like pulled out his laptop. We were having like just hang out Max for Live nerd out sessions at this Airbnb. For anybody listening, Master Track, if you're not familiar, is like Laura Escude. She was one of the first Ableton certified trainer in the world, and she started a playback thing. She's done a lot of playback. She was on this podcast a long time ago, twice actually. She was on the podcast twice with AJ and a bunch of people that work with her through Electronic Creatives. Her team that does playback for like huge artists. Kanye was like her, I think, first major client that she really worked with.
Yep.
So
Pretty good way to get in the game.
yeah, it is for sure.
Also insane. But
Yeah, that's what you're right. Also that part. Yeah.
crazy gig, but
I feel like definitely kept her on her toes, because word on the street is that he would change his mind a lot on tour. So
to
yeah,
put it mildly, but
nothing keeps a playback engineer sharp like having the artist change their mind about their set every other night.
in real time. I mean, classic Laura We on TV incident or whatever. That's like the most infamous. They're on some TV gig, and like she was under the stage, and he wanted to play the first half of some song, and just like assumed everybody would know that. And you get to the second chorus, like skip ahead, and we went on an extra bar, and he's like, "Laura, we on TV," and I guess like his fan base were like, "Who's he talking about?" And like figured out who she was, and
it was like she had like death threats too, didn't she?
Something like that, which just seems a little unnecessary.
Seems a little intense for a Kanye show. Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. That's hilarious. That's hilarious though. Yeah, so anyway, so that's how we met, is through her class teaching playback.
Yeah, which was amazing. So cool at that the JBL, the Harmon Center up there in the Valley. Crazy state-of-the-art technology and innovation center. So and
for real,
a
dude.
summit of like-minded nerds rarely gathered together en masse. So that was an amazing time.
That was cool. Dope. Yeah, there was a lot of good food too. Remember she catered in a few times. I was like, I could move to LA just for the food, honestly.
It's true. Well, better options than where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So did you grow up in Massachusetts? Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah. In the Western Mass, Great Barrington, the Berkshires, if anybody's familiar, Berkshire County, which is beautiful. And until, COVID times, had a lot more going on, at least enough to keep me sustained and entertained in the days when I'm not out on the road. Like, I'm lucky to, be from here, but pretty much most weekends since I've been an adult, I've been out gigging, like more weekends away in my entire adult life than here. So, when things were happening here and I'd be back for the odd weekend here or there's enough to keep me entertained, as I said, but these days it's pretty dismal. And I'm definitely been ready to go and was ready to make a move right before COVID happened and then hunkered down for that, which was the best move to make overall, but definitely feeling it now. So hopefully with this upcoming gig and tour and being back out there again, make myself more available, make better connections, have a good, super recent, relevant, large scale gig that I just completed. So I can be like, I just did this, and make myself available to utilize these skills.
Yeah, dude. Well, you've got a lot of like random skills that are really valuable, which we'll definitely nerd out about. Anybody listening right now, definitely check out Jules' social links and everything. I'll include in the links of this podcast episode because you're a playback wizard and you're a badass drummer. And I love like the little drum video things you did. I was like preparing for this podcast, so I pretty much looked at your entire Instagram feed last night, just trolling through the videos because I'm a drummer too.
Yeah.
I appreciate somebody who has like a good clap stack of cymbals.
The worst cymbals I had turned into the best sound on the kit now. I'll put that clap stack up against anybody. Give me a $300 Istanbul. They got nothing on mine. The secret is the bottom cymbal of it, which I'm hesitant to give away, but I will on this pod. Anybody listening to this deserves to know. It's the bottom cymbal of the clap stack is actually a Tama cymbal.
Tama cymbal? Yeah,
which I found it like in the back corner of some random venue sometime, and I was like, is this anybody's? And someone there was like, nah, like you can have that. Dude. And it's just very bendy. It's like the worst cymbal ever, but it bend well, and I think that's a pretty important part of those clap stacks is to get a little air between them. Oh, okay. So it's that and like two thin broken Sabians and claps.
Anybody who's a drummer or not drummer, if you want something to just sound cool, find a crappy cymbal for like $10 on Facebook Marketplace, drill some holes in it, or like make a clap stack.
Bend it over your knee.
Bend it over your knee and just bang it out. Yeah, you can make some crazy sounds with those.
It slaps, it claps, it does the traps.
Yep, all the things.
It's great. Yeah, it's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. I was going to talk to you about a lot of things, but before we dive into all like the nerdy shit, like I would love to just get to know you a little bit better because we only hung out like a handful of times.
Yeah.
What was your music background growing up? Like, how did you get into Ableton Live? All that good stuff.
Totally. So my dad I wouldn't say a professional musician at this point. He's retired, but was a professional musician long before I came along and then throughout my entire childhood and young adulthood out playing different gigs. He was a violinist.
Sweet.
Classically trained, went to the New England Conservatory of Music, studied under like Leonard Bernstein at Tanglewood when he was younger, was friends with Leonard's son, Alex Bernstein. So that's like just crazy musical royalty to be in the midst of as a young classical musician.
Sick.
And then ran a nightclub for most of my childhood too. I think when I turned like 9 or 10, my parents rehabilitated this old nightclub that my mom's uncle used to run back in the 50s. It's like a funky little roadhouse in Egremont, Massachusetts called the Old Egremont Club. And they fired that back up right around the millennium. And I think they ran it for, well, now that I think about it, it's probably more like 97. I think they actually opened it. So I would have been 8 and ran it for about 7 years.
That's cool.
And they had awesome music there too, like definitely local stuff. But there's a lot of great musicians around here. For numerous reasons. We have Tanglewood near here. For the similar reasons that kept me here for a long time, which is it's very central to the rest of New England, like 2.5 hours from New York, 2.5 hours from Boston. right near Interstate 90 and equidistant to so many of the big cities in New England, Hartford, Burlington, Albany, Northampton, all these things. So it is great as a gigging musician who plays a lot of those towns to be from here. So there is, naturally has been a great music scene, or at least was when I was growing up, that my dad and a bunch of people he played with and other good local bands, but they'd get national acts in there too. Like I remember the Charmaine Neville, who's like the daughter of one of the famous Neville brothers. Her and her whole awesome band from New Orleans.
Nice.
Would come up as a kid. That was always a big, great time. And so, raised in that club, raised going to gigs with my dad. My grandfather was a huge like jazz aficionado. He had like 50,000 jazz records when he died, which is insane. And that was before I appreciated or understood the value in like old records. And I think my uncle may have offloaded them quickly, but so just always grew up with music around and the live environment, and started playing in bands in high school, or jamming with my dad when I was like young. My older brother, who lived there for a minute, had a drum set. He's a drummer too, had a drum set in the basement, and he wasn't around. Me and my dad would jam. So got into that, and there's always tons of gear around. My dad's really good buddy growing up. His best friend was like an instrument dealer, and, would go to flea markets and find amazing stuff and rehabilitate it. So his whole house was filled with insane gear growing up. So I was always surrounded by like incredible gear. And I don't know. I mean, when I was really little, I wanted to like make movies. So I was into cameras and, editing software and stuff pretty early. And I think all of that just lent to a natural inclination to be techie with music and art. So then when I really got into art and drumming, at one point I had this like crappy little Yamaha drum sampler pad. It wasn't the good pad. It was like the little kid version with like the 4 round things on it that would just make like 8 noises or something like that. Nice. I would run that into an old Ibanez delay pedal that my dad had. So that was like my first foray into like electronic stuff, but was also into electronic music. And my brother introduced me like Mouse on Mars when I was really young. And, The Orb. I remember hearing The Orb on my brother's Volkswagen Quantum on a mini disc player when I was like 10, and be like, this is incredible. I love this. So I always loved electronic music. And I think it was probably like junior year or early senior year of high school. My best friend Clayton, who I played in a lot of bands with over the years, was like, I'm going to get this Ableton Live software, which we had peripherally heard mentioned by like Sound Tribe and Hot Chip. I think we're one of the few live acts. Like, remember the old Ableton videos? Those were like the first ones ever. Yeah. And we had heard about it a little bit, wanted to start messing with it and just get our chops up. And we split going in on a license back then, and never really looked back. I was really lucky to have my buddy Ian Stewart, who's an amazing mastering engineer now. That's like what he does as his main gig, but was a producer forever. Kind of just taught me the ins and outs of like digital audio at the core when I was young. Cause I had messed with Reason a little bit at my buddy's house, but never really got the whole, like how to sequence a whole song. But I enjoyed the patching and the, like, it's like real gear kind of thing of it, but didn't really go far with that. And then when we got Ableton, just got immersed in it. That was right when YouTube really was popping, right? That would have been like 2006. Yeah. Because I graduated in 2007. So somewhere in the 2005, 2006 range, which also would have been Ableton 6, I think, right?
Probably.
Yeah, picked that up, was able to watch tutorials, was diligent about doing the lessons in it, and then had my buddy Ian Stewart, who was really able to tell me about like EQs and learning the frequency spectrum and, how does a compressor work? And which I'm still learning. Like I get it now, there's always, right. But like, just the basics of some of those things, signal path and routing and all that kind of stuff. I was really lucky to have him there to help kind of get the workflow going and be able to just be creative quicker. And I just started producing like tons of electronic music. That was right when EDM was also becoming EDM, like what we know it is now. It wasn't in every commercial, and Deadmau5 had only released 1 EP. It was just like the olden days. So I got super into it, and I was producing like hundreds of tracks for shit tracks, obviously, but cutting my teeth on it. What I did mess up fundamentally, which taught me a lifelong Ableton lesson, which was I was saving every new song into the same project for like a year. So I had all these files that had like the same names or like were, hard to keep track of and didn't know about collect all and save and all these things that I think any one that I hadn't exported a version of, I pretty much like lost the files of it. So there's like this whole random year of like the beginning of that whole time that is kind of lost in the ether. But I learned a ton. I think there was a moment though where I was so focused on that I was neglecting my drums, and I just felt this imbalance in myself, and producing in EDM was like really blowing up by that point, and it just seemed like, I don't know, I feel it's one of those what ifs in life. Like if I had kept just going all in on producing electronic music, like maybe that would have taken over my life and something could have, bigger could have happened, but it wasn't fulfilling like this musical thing I needed with drums as well. So I kind of went back and then started combining them more, using triggers and kind of just being better with a click so I could play along the stuff that I had going on in there.
Yeah.
Then got a gig with this band called the Indobox, who had been around for a while and let their old original drummer go, hired me, and they had a lot of like backing tracks and different samples and stuff like that, and it worked out well. And that was like really the first gig where I was out on the road, like using Ableton like a playback rig while drumming. So I still didn't really know it. I was not nearly as good at it as I am now, obviously, as all things should be, but it was a great way to like use it that way instead of just producing. So,
hey, just wanted to let you guys know that this episode is sponsored by Vocalia. If you don't know Vocalia, they make a cool standalone app that can convert audio into MIDI using any microphone, or they also have their Dubler to USB microphone. Vocalia creates a microphone and a desktop app to help you make more of the music you love without having to worry about getting your ideas into the DAW. The Dubler 2 transforms your voice into a real-time MIDI controller, allowing you to write music at the speed of thought. If you can sing it, beatbox it, hum it, whistle it, now you can play it. Dubler works with all DAWs, obviously Ableton Live being the best, and you have the option to purchase the Dubler Studio Kit 2, which provides everything you need to vocally translate your music ideas into reality. The kit comes with Dubler 2 software, a custom USB microphone, and alternatively, you can purchase the software only if you wanted to and calibrate your own preferred microphone that you already have. They were generous enough to give us a discount code. So if you go to vocalia.com, that's VOCHLEA.com, enter the discount code Live Producers Online. That's Live Producers Online. That'll save you 10%, and this code will expire on the 18th of October, 2022. So check it out while you still can. And yeah, I've really been having fun with this. Much love to Vocalia for supporting this podcast. Check out the link in the show notes for this special offer, and back to today's podcast. That's really cool. Actually, I feel like we have very similar stories because summarized version, I had a very similar path. Like instead of a club, like my mom was like the head of like the music department of the biggest church in town. So like I had access to all the gear, and I go in there like at night and just like play with stuff and mess it up for the next service, and they'd get mad. Like I was just like presets, changing everything and moving the drums and playing and recording. And yeah, and then I got to the point of producing like yourself, because we're both drummers, and it was like that weird balance and dance of like, I'm producing, it's way easier to play the beats with my fingers or to program it than how do I actually play my drums live and make it sound cohesive and like incorporate the stems to make it not sound like garbage on stage. I remember I did a talent show in college and uploaded the YouTube video before I realized there was YouTube monetization. It has now it has like 700,000 plays, so I probably could have made a couple grand off of it, but ignorant me in college, it was like I had no idea. I was too busy partying to learn anything about marketing. Right. So like, yeah, it was
a different world then. I think we're like the exact same age, right?
Probably. I'm 34. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's like right around when that wasn't even. There was not literature to learn that or know where it could go. So
got our whole lives ahead of us. So young.
Whole internet to explore.
But yeah, I mean, you're doing really cool stuff now. Well, let's back up. Like, as far as your Mad MIDI project, like, when did that come in? As far as like doing that kind of stuff, maybe explain that to people.
That was okay. So yeah, Mad MIDI. I started in late. I guess that would have been 2018 when I finally upgraded my computer after way too long. It could run Max for Live and a bunch of cool stuff, had a better video card. Yeah, so Mad MIDI is triggering and sampling video pretty much. I go on and would find, think of a cool theme or see a video online that had a cool audio and visual component to it.
Yeah.
Sample bits of both in tandem and then trigger the video and the sound with the drums in real time. And it's evolved into now triggering lights and manipulating the live audio through things like the X32 board in real time and OBS, controlling OBS with Ableton for just like, it was really in tandem with COVID happening. Like I had already evolved the project a decent amount by then, but once I was in the studio all the time and could just dig in and like route things permanently or do installations in my space to make it better, it turned into like a full one person production studio with like running the stream and the recording, stuff like that, the lighting in real time, all the audio mixes, and triggering back video and sampling stuff like that. So I've done a bunch of fun pieces, some of which I can't really perform right now because I switched over to the newer version of Resolume, and between Resolume 5 and 6, they completely changed how the MIDI mapping works. So all your MIDI mapping goes away from 5 to 6, and you just have to redo it. And there's no solution to it, which is kind of absurd for how amazing Resolume is, how great their customer service is, how many answers there are, how intuitive it is. That is like a major sore subject because between all the pieces I've made, thousands of mappings of little individual clips mapped to certain things and sequences. That's just like, do you go back and fix old stuff or do you just keep moving forward? So I have them recorded, but it's brutal to kind of
That is brutal, man.
Hundreds of hours of that.
I couldn't imagine if Ableton did that. Like if they just changed like all their MIDI mapping from like 10 to 11. Think about how many people would have to remap all of their projects. That would take forever. Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. All right, rest in peace, my early Mad MIDI pieces. But
yeah, for real.
Yeah. And now I'm at the point where my video card and my laptop is getting really tired again. Luckily, I have a new PC that has a crazy graphics card in it that I just need to transfer my Resolume over to. Just got that going recently, so I'm going to do that. And it should, theoretically, once I install or get the composition and all the files on there, if I just set up like an Ethernet MIDI and OSC connection to it and match the ports, it should pick right exactly up where it was before. And then my laptop can just handle the Ableton side of it, which then I'll be rocking again. So.
Yeah. And to back up anybody who's lost, like if you don't know anything about Resolume, it's basically like a VJing software. It's like think of it like video DJing, basically.
Audio or video media. It does audio and video, but video media server.
One of my friends told me, and it like kind of opened my eyes to anybody wanting to get into Resolume. It's session view sideways.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of it is the opposite order, but it works in a very similar way. Yeah. Like only one thing in a row can play as opposed to up and down. But it's other than that MIDI mapping snafu that they did, it's one of the greatest softwares just in terms of ease of use, flexibility, stability. Yeah, creativity, the user base and support around it is great. The manual is amazing. Full OSC, MIDI, and DMX mappability both ways. It's pimping. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I used to
forgive them for the MIDI map stuff.
Yeah, we'll give them a pass this time. There's a Ableton pack called Connection Kit, and there's some good tools in there for syncing live to Resolume that I've used for anybody listening that might be interested. There's like
it's fantastic,
and they have a OSC Touch OSC device, which I don't know, I'm sure you've probably played with. And then they have like an OSC send for just sending OSC into Resolume, but I digress. Anyway, so I think it's cool that you're doing that. One of the first things you showed me when we were at Master Track, we were all just hanging out. Robert Trusco was there too. He's the man. Have you talked to him recently?
Maybe 6 months ago or so. I was talking about spots in Dallas to try to connect one of the artists I work with. But I keep up, checking out what he's doing online. He's always killing. Yeah,
he's killing
in the Dallas scene, which I will actually be down there for that show with Benny. So I will hit him up.
You definitely should. Yeah, if I go to Dallas, I need to hit him up. He was rated Jazz Bassist of the Year last year.
Which is crazy in Dallas too. Like, not that he doesn't deserve it, but it's just such a serious player scene down there. So that's like a serious thing to win.
It really is.
Awesome. Yeah. Props, Trusco.
But anyway, we were all hanging out and just like sharing stuff we were doing. And I remember you showing me a video of you playing drum triggers. I think you were using like roll-in triggers, which was like synced up to video. I don't know if you were using Resolume or not, but you were like playing drums, which was triggering real-time effects with like videos that you had on the wall. And It was really dope. So once again, anybody go check out some of your videos on social media that you've posted. You probably see some of that in your feed from back in the day.
Yeah, totally. Tons of that on Insta.
Yeah. So was that Resolume? Like how, maybe just like talk through how you were doing that. Cause I thought that was really cool for anybody that maybe wants to like play a drum pad or whatever and trigger any kind of video. Like what is your setup?
Yeah, that was definitely with Resolume at that point. I guess the too long didn't read version of how it's set up is MIDI comes out of Ableton. So I have the triggers come in and then I can kind of direct them. Like I can send the snare trigger into numerous different channels to process it in different ways. And a lot of times I'd send it through one of a few different devices, like gate triggered step sequencer from Max for Live, which I was using one by a developer called Heaps of Bleeps, which was it was cool, but it would be a little buggy. And then at one point I opened my session, which had like 200 of these devices in it with different patterns, like different chains with each song had like a different one with a different pattern in it, and it dumped all of the patterns. So once again, I'd have to go back through and reprogram them. So I had to get away from that one, unfortunately. But now I use the melody trigger from Tobias, the Ableton drummer, who's the homie. Love that guy. I think he's been on this, right?
He was, yeah. He's the man. Toby's the man.
He's the best. He's a saint.
AbletonDrummer.com for anybody else.
Yeah, AbletonDrummer.com. Definitely. Gotta love that dude. He just makes such great devices.
He does. He cranks out so many too. I don't know how he has time to do all these devices.
Hopefully it's paying all his bills because
so.
He deserves it. And he's putting in that work.
Yeah.
So the melody trigger is an amazing one. And I was lucky enough to beta test it and give him some feedback. And we are due for a catch up for some of the ideas that I did have for the second version of it. So I'd have to touch base with him. Glad I'm thinking of that right now.
Yeah.
But the melody trigger is a similar gate triggered step sequencer. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is going to take one MIDI note in, or any MIDI notes, but if I'm using a drum trigger, it's just sending that one note that the trigger box sets and walks through a predetermined pattern of notes that then come out. So if you're, say, triggering from your hi-hat and the hi-hat sends one MIDI note in and it's the key trigger note for that step sequencer, you can set up these patterns. And what's great about the melody trigger is it has, I think, 16 different patterns that in one version of the device, up to 64 notes per pattern, and can also be set to take be in a key and a scale, or you can even drop a MIDI clip in and then target that MIDI and it'll make whatever notes are in that the pattern notes. And you can set the velocity of each note, the note length of each note.
It's almost kind of like a MIDI arpeggiator is kind of what I'm thinking.
Right, but it's at your own pace.
Right.
And it can be, any random pattern. So it doesn't just have to be an up or a down or whatever. You can just make a cool rhythmic riff in there and walk through it as you hit it. So as a drummer, it's a great, we're so rhythmic. So it's really cool to come up with rhythmic riff ideas, but then have the notes of it either be predetermined. Sometimes I'll randomize it totally and just see what comes out, which is super inspiring and be a great writing tool as well. So pretty much the MIDI will come in from the triggers. Each individual drum has its own melody trigger, but as I said, I can reroute them. So I can send all my triggers just through one of them or change which one goes into another. And then each one of those can then be determined which out channel to Resolume it goes, and it goes over via IAC on this computer. But when I get on my PC, we'll go out over a network Ethernet session into the PC. And then I'm just mapping two random clips in there, and usually would have, I guess, a different deck in Resolume for each new song, because then each deck can be remapped to the same, use a note that you used in the previous deck on a new clip. Yeah. So just, the Mad MIDI session has evolved into just very scalable, trackable ways of managing all that, which pipe is the MIDI coming in, which one's it going out of, which sequence out of this melody trigger 16 am I using for this? And
and then all those MIDI like values coming in from Ableton to Resolume, you could just like find random effects and layers and like have them do different things on top of the same video clip or change video clips or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you CCs to map to effect parameters or toggles to turn an effect on a certain layer or on a certain clip on or off, and then notes pretty much to trigger the video clips.
Yeah, it's dope.
But then I started getting into OSC way more, and Resolume, unlike Ableton, at least natively, has full OSC in and out. Yeah. And for anybody who doesn't really know OSC is like infinite MIDI in a way, right? Yeah. Like a MIDI, you're limited to, I say limited, but it's like 2,500, things or something, but 16 channels, 127 notes and 127 CCs per channel, which there is a limit to. Sure. Whereas with OSC, everything in OSC has its own unique address. So just it's always 1-to-1, and it can just be infinite pretty much. Yeah. There's no overlapping, and it's way more high
resolution. The resolution
high
is
resolution,
much higher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can just, with Resolume, some of the parameters go between 0 and 1,000 instead of 0 and 127. Yeah. So if you're sending a CC over from Ableton to it, it's gonna jump and get blocky as you go through, a camera pan or a zoom or something like that. Whereas if you're using straight OSC, it's just super smooth and buttery.
Yeah. We love that butter.
Yeah. So OSC has become just a huge part of my workflow with the X32 board, with Resolume, with Touch OSC on the iPad, Cliffx, and Ableton.
Yeah. Yeah, you're big into OSC or Touch OSC, the program. Yeah. You use an iPad.
I've been using that forever.
Yeah. What are you mostly using Touch OSC on your iPad for these days?
At this point, I mean, for the Mad MIDI session, so much.
Because I know what it is, but I haven't actually like hands-on played with it much. But I know that in the world of playback or people who want to be able to do any kind of virtual routing or mappings, like it's a game changer for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's just much more flexible.
Right. So for somebody who's like newer to Touch OSC, like what would you say are some of the big advantages for Touch OSC?
Let's just make a distinction for people too. Touch OSC is an iPad app that allows you to make your own custom templates, make your own buttons, resize them, labels, faders, all that. And that's pretty much infinitely scalable. And it can send either OSC or MIDI. So for years, I was using it just to I'd make a button and give it a MIDI value before A, I had a way of getting OSC information into Ableton, and B, before I had software like Resolume or things like the X32, which natively receive OSC. So I was a little blind to the full potential until I started really digging in and had a context to use it in. OSC itself is a protocol, open sound control. So it is, as I said, higher resolution, 0 to 1, but with every decimal point in between instead of 0 to 127. And then there's a bunch of different types of values. There's float values like that. So if you have a knob that's floating the decimal amount, that's how much, if a fader's all the way up, it's going to be sending 1. If it's all the way down, it's 0. There's also string addresses, which is just like the name of the parameter. For example, on an X32, mute button would, could be a string value saying like CH channel /01/mute/on. Or you could send it a float value and it would be boom, boom, / not on, but 0 if it was on, or 1. So there's different ways of creating the same message that way, but everything is unique, right? So you're never dealing with overlapping MIDI in or out channels and Ableton mappings that are weird. So Touch OSC is amazing because for every new element that you add, you can give a MIDI message, an OSC message, multiple OSC messages or MIDI messages, which can be really handy. They can come out of different ports virtually. So you could have your X32 listening to one OSC port and receiving a message that only goes out of that one from this button. And then Resolume can be receiving a different message from the same button on a different port.
Yeah.
And it's all
it's wireless
over
too.
Network, right? So it works more over IP between IP addresses and then UDP ports per, device. So like my computer shows up as one IP on my, home network, but then different softwares have different UDP port ins and outs.
Yeah.
So you're able, to just totally customize. And that's why the template and working on the iPad's amazing, because as my Mad MIDI set has grown, I can just make a new page in TouchOSC and make new buttons and name them whatever I want and give them unique addresses, send them to whichever port I need to send them to, and just infinitely scalable, and everything's labelable. So it's just very easy to just say this button is this and not have to remember or look at 40 little APC 40 buttons and be like, wait, which one's which? So
and low latency too. That's nice.
Oh yeah. It's all over network and very light, and the size of the messages is negligible. So you can be sending like hundreds or even thousands in one dump of data from your controller to your receiving thing, and it can pretty much parse it all and deal with it really well. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much do anything and everything with my TouchOSC template that I might need to do. I have pages here. I'll grab it. And for anybody who is watching.
Yeah, for all the people out there who want to see some video, little TouchOSC
content of me holding up my template. So
this is what an iPad looks like.
So that's like one page of my template that actually controls the melody triggers right there. And there's beautiful. 2 of them. These are the ones that sit between the triggers and the I have a Moog Sub 37 over there and a Arturia Micro Freak. So I can go right in there and be like, which, drum, kick, snare, hi-hat 1, hi-hat 2, or the little mesh pad or the bar trigger, the MIDI fighter, or channel 22, which I can just kind of my default like aux. Anything that goes into 22, I can always pick up there. And I can apply scale, randomize the notes in it, go back to the first note of a sequence, and then have like, how many steps do I want it to do? All the different scales. I can choose the scale in there. If anybody watching see that, it's all the different scales Ableton offers. And then the key, and you'll see these little red numbers in here, and those will respond and feed back from Ableton using Cliffx and the Cliffx binding. So I can see what key I'm changing it to, match the 2 and do all that. So what's great about, and that's just one page of this. I have a page for the X32, which has a ton of pages within it, right? So if I go over to the X32 tab, all these other ones show up, and it's like, how much do my drums go into the different drum mix or into a different effects bus on the board? And just anytime so I have a new possibilities, feature or functionality, I can just get right in there and add it.
Yeah. It'd be cool if they added some kind of, I don't know, app or something so it wasn't just strictly for an iPad. It'd be cool. Like,
it can run on desktop now.
Oh, it does? Really?
Yep. The latest version can run on desktop and send in and out from itself as a standalone software, which is awesome. Dude. And it's great for live editing. Because if you can be editing on the computer, make the computer a server, and then the iPad is showing the same one you're working on. So as you're moving things around, it's like updating on the iPad in real time, which for editing and designing is great.
Yeah.
But like another totally different example of how this can be, and I'm starting to use it, is like virtual production with Unreal Engine, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Unreal Engine can accept OSC. So say you're on an Unreal Engine or a virtual production shoot, you could have your DP or your lighting person who wants to augment the Unreal virtual set can be running an iPad, and then I'd be like in the truck where the computers and all the stuff are with the main Unreal Engine engineer, and they're like, oh, I want to give the lighting guy, girl, whoever, a control over this parameter. I can just add a new thing in the TouchOSC template, give it the address that then the Unreal Engine engineer is going to map it to, and it will just show up on the DP's iPad as a new thing that they, this light in this part of the virtual set. So it's just very real-time, flexible. It's great for many workflows. That's totally different way of using it.
It's pretty wild to see like the evolution of like what a playback engineer used to be and like an artist. Like they should make like one of the, you ever see those like evolution things of like, it was like
Right, the monkey like getting taller.
Yeah, exactly. Should make
into
one for
like
a
the playback rig that's 3,500 pounds down to like the eye connect down to just the iPad.
He just has like surrounded by like computers and iPads, and that's pretty much what it's become now. It's like the playback engineer wears tons of hats rather than just being. Didn't they used to call playback engineers space bars? Because when they were just using before Ableton was like the standard. I think Laura said that because like your job was literally just hitting space bar to hit play basically on stage, like on the side using Pro Tools.
Yeah, come a long way. Anything and everything. It's the heartbeat of the whole show, really. You know,
really is. Yeah, especially for bigger productions too. Well, in even like smaller shows that you've played, you've done some really interesting gigs. I saw recently you played with Honeycomb at Electric Forest, which is one of my favorite music festivals.
Amazing festival.
Yeah. How was that?
It really reinvigorated my love of festivals as someone who's been to quite a few of them back in the day as a young hippie and as a musician as well, and then put on one for years, which, you know, was amazing, but also gave me some PTSD.
I bet.
And made me just grumpy and grouchy when festivals suck and are rainy or inhospitable. Mm-hmm. Electric Forest really reinstilled my love and faith of festivals, like just between the amazing site and how it's laid out and the incredible art and the stage designs were ridiculously cool and the hospitality was great and it didn't rain at all. Huge plus.
Such a plus.
Yeah, and just everyone was really nice and cool and it was so good. It was so good. And Honeycomb, that's the homie. Been friends with him since before he was even really performing professionally or doing anything like that. He's from Massachusetts as well and used to come to our shows and our festies, and we became friends being on the scene together. And over the last few years of COVID and all that, really reconnected and helped him kind of get his streaming rig going, and then helped him develop an X32 based setup for his live looping and his whole setup. And now I just completed a new Ableton based looper for him with a custom Touch OSC template and some crazy Cliffx stuff, which we'll get into in a bit. Yeah, and that's the homie. I mean, he's just an amazing dude and a great, super, genuine, awesome person and super talented musician. And getting his dues these days. It was so cool. He had T-Pain like rated his Twitch stream.
I saw that.
He was just blown away and was like, I could have this guy open for me anywhere. And we were like, all right, T-Pain, like put your money where your mouth is. And 6 months later, Honeycomb's like on the bus going on a sold out cross country tour opening for him. So we're like,
so cool.
T-Pain is the man.
Yeah, he really is. He really is.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
He was playing a show at Meow Wolf, which is like one of my favorite small venues here in Denver. Yeah. And he was telling me, I was talking to him about like his looping rig and nerding out a little bit. It was also super loud, so we're like shouting at each other in the back of the venue.
Love that.
But yeah, like spitting on each other, trying to communicate. And but he's a super cool guy. And yeah, he was telling me, he's like, one of my homies is going to be building an Ableton rig using Cliffx. I was like, oh, no way. I didn't even know it was you. But we were like talking about it. I was like, cool. He's interesting. For anybody who doesn't know Honeycomb, he has a really interesting live setup with doing a lot of looping with a lot of analog and a lot of analog pedals and routing. And I'm not sure, what was the loop pedal he was using now?
He uses the 505, the classic standard Mark Rebier.
Yeah.
Beatboxer grade.
Which is cool. It's actually, it's a cool looping analog pedal.
I mean, it's a great platform. Yeah. And it's not that it's bad overall, and that's why he's trying to get away from it. But there's some stuff about the new setup with Ableton that is just infinitely going to be better in terms of
more flexible,
in unlimited loops and individual sequenceability for each new layer and recording every single new clip that comes in and gets looped is an audio clip that he can keep track of and it exists on its own. Mm-hmm.
I don't see a lot of artists out there where their main instrument is like their voice without actually singing. Like, cause he'll just like loop himself. He does a lot of like interesting like bass synth, like modulated sounds with his voice, and he'll just loop that, and it's pretty wild. Like he's really talented.
He's fantastic, and people love it, and just gets crazy, cool sounds that you just haven't seen before, or definitely not in that way. Yeah, like using the talk box for beatboxing with like a crazy bass in it, and all that will still be part of his rig, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the functionality with Ableton, you know, you can have presets on all the synths, getting program changes, and then like one button in Touch OSC that can be, you know, the garage music sound bank. That one button press will send a program change to a specific group of sounds in different synths, and easily, just to maximize creative flow and minimize menu jumping or button pushing or anything like that. Just quickly be able to like switch all that up, have new sounds, a new looping template ready to go.
Yeah.
Tons of more effects capabilities at different stages of the thing. Like that was one of the things I built in for him, is for every instrument that comes in, you can put, you know, I right now made 20 effect slots in the Touch OSC template that will get live names and values back from Ableton using Cliffx and OSC output that he can apply to any of the incoming instruments. So he can go in there, say, okay, I want to put these 4 effects on this one instrument, and then take a loop of it. So he'll be recording the raw audio coming in, but we won't be hearing that. And then he'll loop it with the effect on, so that'll be baked into the loop if he makes it that way. But you can also take a clean loop and then put the effects on that group that the loop is in, or have the overall wet and dry master. So there's two masters, one with no effects, one with, that he can send any group into. So he can apply effects at any stage now, depending on how he wants to maintain the original recording or bundle together effects processing, which is really cool. So yeah, just more flexibility that way.
Sure. Here's another question, which I'm sure somebody is thinking right now. Why not just use Ableton's looper instead of Cliffx for a lot of the looping capabilities?
The main reason that I can say for that is that each individual stem is not recorded and preserved that way, right? Like in the looper, there is the drag me function, but if you make 6 layers on that loop and drag it over, which also requires a physical mouse movement, you're only getting the 6 baked in as one. Whereas the way he can do it now, if every single layer that's a new layer of, you know, is its own audio clip, say he has, you know, performed and done a bunch of shows with it and has a ton of different scenes populated with cool little loops that are all in time and on the grid, he could at some point just show up with pretty much a laptop and like an APC and do a remix set of all his stuff. Because he'll have every single layer and every single loop. He can also still take in or out everything. So if he makes, you know, kick drum, boom, loops that, makes one that's the hi-hats, this, you know, snare, boom, 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 he can subsequence each loop of that within a greater group. Because I'm kind of, if anybody's familiar with the 505, there's 5 pads, which I have emulated as groups in Ableton. And then you can keep layering layers onto those, each one of those, but you can only go back and undo one. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's all baked into one thing at the end of it. Same with the looper. So with this, it's all saved. Everything is its own clip at the end of the day. He's going to catch everything dry coming in at the very front end, no matter what. And yeah, just some, like, another thing about the looper, I guess whoever developed it for Ableton left when it was like halfway done being implemented into the API. So there's like a bunch of the parameters of the looper are seen by the Ableton API, but there's a bunch that are not. So it doesn't give output feedback and it's not mappable. And it's just kind of inflexible in that way, you know?
So
it's like a weird part of the Ableton lore there. It's like
so they'd pretty much have to go in and redo the entire looper if they wanted to fix.
But it's only for the hyper nerds who are like, I need to get into the API path of like parameter 7 to get like feedback coming off of it, which is a rare instance. So I understand why they haven't done that. But I've done 2 different projects, one for Laura and another one for a friend, an artist named Perry Hall, who's an amazing artist. He's does bass looping, but he also does visual art. He's worked with Sigur Rós and a bunch of cool people.
Cool.
Worked on that movie Lucy.
Oh, dope.
Johansson.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
But he was using echoplexes. He was using 4 hardware echoplexes for years as a looper and really wanted to recreate the functionality, that kind of logic that those had. So that was a project using the stock Ableton Looper because he didn't need to preserve the audio. That's really the main reason why I did Honeycombs the way we did it, so that every single new thing is saved its own little micro clip.
And you can go and recall it without it being baked into a bunch of layers in the same looper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure if the Ableton or the Looper developer who made it, worked for Ableton or whatever, the programmer had stuck around, things like Drag Me would have been, a button, commit to new clip on this track or something like that, just so then it could be automated or mapped, whereas the Drag Me function, as I said, requires that mouse move. So
see, that'd be cool. That'd be nice if that was just like an easily mappable thing, because I think that'd be a game changer for so many people.
Absolutely.
Really
and it's a sore subject among like some of the Cliffx community who,
Yeah.
Like numerous people, if you go back on the forums and stuff, have arrived at the realization like, wait, why don't these parameters have, an API path or whatever? And then you find like a response from the Ableton person like, well, yeah, those never got mapped and it's never going to happen. So sorry. But I learned that before starting this project, luckily, and was able to kind of tackle it in a different way, which goes into the Cliffx discussion more whenever we get to that point. There's some really cool shit I learned with that.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't tried to like completely reinvent the looper with a Max for Live device, or maybe I'm just unaware, like something that kind of meets a lot of these needs and checks all the boxes.
I think there are some. There's also like, what's the name of it?
There was a looper device that I can't even remember the name of right now, but it was like the Looper 2 or Super Looper.
There's Loopy Pro, and then there's another, which is its kind of own app, but I think could be controlled by Ableton, which I'd looked at a little bit. Honeycomb sent me over that. Like, how's it, does this have any good ideas or things? And it is very dope and almost went down that path, but it's just heavier on the computer. It's its own app.
Yeah.
There are some limitations, like once again, just doesn't record everything as its own recallable clip, as not being our main priority. It kind of was a deal breaker for any other way than the way we went. But there's another, it's like Mobius Looper, some other device that I think is built in Max that is pretty capable. But I at this point try to avoid Max for Live if I can at all, which is a huge part of why I live and die by Cliffx at this point, because Max for Live is awesome, but can be buggy. It's burned me in the past with like things like that one device, that Step Sequencer, just losing all of its sequences because of some I don't know. I was like at a point update in Live, I think just like blew those out at one point. And it's just super heavy because when you use Max for Live, Max is running in the background and all that processing needs to go out and into that and back in. So
it probably also depends on how the device was coded too. Some are definitely like more intense than others.
For sure. And more stable, better programmers. I mean, it's cool that it's open source and someone who doesn't get every fundamental of computer programming like me, like saying I don't get it, can make a device that works, but maybe way more bloated than it needs to get the same thing done sometimes, right? So just trying to avoid that and make it as Ableton centric as possible was the goal there. But
nothing worse than like seeing that CPU meter fluttering up in like the high yellow 50% or more.
For real.
On stage, that's enough to make anybody scared and crap their pants.
Yeah, it can get very unpredictable at that point, and then it seems to get exponential. Like you start getting into those high CPU usage, your temperature starts spiking, and then everything is working harder to do what it was before, and it just becomes like an out of control thing that can shut your show down depending on how much stuff you're trying to do. Keep in mind, he's gonna be recording everything as well as that happens. A lot of audio getting recorded.
Oh wow, he's recording the whole. He wants to record his entire set then too.
All the input channels, right? So his rig will be instruments coming into an X32 or an X-Air, depending on which one he's bringing out to the show, that are coming into channels in Ableton which aren't being heard but are recording, and then there's like a pre-fader send into the different groups. So you're always hearing what's happening in real time, but that first, this is the raw sound coming in spot is going to be always running. And
so you just have like Cliffx telling the monitoring to be off until
that's not even Cliffx. That's just monitor off, sends only. And then the loop groups, listen to the main group pre-fader. So if the fader's muted or you're not hearing it come out the fader, you're still seeing it show up on those channels. And then those are set to off. So it's like their inputs are set to in, but they're set to sends only. Or no, they're set to go to the group, and then the group is sends only, but not going to any sends. And then each loop group listens to the input group pre-fader, so that any sound that comes in then does show up in those. So we're recording clean, never getting anything doubled, and it's set to in on the loop. So set to off on the loop. So as soon as something's looping, then you're hearing that audio play through the channel.
Okay.
It's all with the X32. So the real-time stuff can go right to front of house before it goes into Ableton or alongside that. And there's some, just intelligent logic kind of set up there to never make anything doubled, but hear it at whatever stage he wants to hear it. If he wants to apply Ableton effects to something he's playing with before he loops it, he can do that. If he wants to just hear it in his ears as he dials it in or makes a loop and then you don't hear it till it's looping, he can do that. And that's more adjusting in auto or off on the loop group settings.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds. How long did it take you to build this template or this rig for him? Just like a couple hours.
Yeah. It was a lot of thinking, a lot of just thinking through stuff for a minute of like, how is it going to come in that it's not going to double, it's not going to be redundant, like audio wise, things doubling up on top of each other. How are we going to organize these groups and the monitoring and the routing in a way that's going to be flexible, catch the recordings at each stage that we want, and then actually building it out, and then getting into the making the Touch OSC template and writing all this custom kind of Cliffx stuff for it. I mean, realistically, probably 40 to 50 hours. Like,
I believe that.
Like that.
Definitely believe that. Yeah, I know just enough about Cliffx not to sound dumb, but I haven't spent a ton of time with it. Are you using Live 11 or 10 with Cliffx?
Both, but I mostly work in 10 just because if I program in 10, it can be opened in 10 or 11. But if I start in 11 and because, Honeycomb's still on 10. He's not using Ableton 11. Cool. My Mad MIDI I still keep in 10. New client I just started working with yesterday was like, we can go I could go either way. I produce an 11 or do this. I was like, well, let's just go with 10 because then like if something happens and you need to use someone else's computer and they only have 10, you can open it in there. But if you have 11, you can obviously open in that too. So, and the Cliffx does have a working, that should be released by now, 11 version, but I guess they're waiting on Stray, the developer, to just do a final sign off or check. But
that's why I was asking, because there was like an unofficial release on like GitHub that was
which was
going around
not by Stray, and then Stray just showed up and was like, here it is, everybody, and like test it for me. But that's been over a year now, and it's like kind of crazy that they're not.
It's not official.
It's not official yet. It's a little debilitating for certain projects or certain people who are so into 11 that
and there's so many commands, and like I feel like just one little update to 11 could break a command or something. Like there'd be
exactly.
That'd be quite the job
kind of happening
as a programmer to have to keep updating for all the future versions on such a robust thing like Cliffx.
Well, there's a big change over from Ableton 10 to 11 with Python to Python 2. So it really did need to be like rewritten from, the ground up, or I don't know. I don't honestly know how much of like a super back end change that required, but Stray did it at some point, and it does work. I haven't personally run into any problems or missing functionality when on 11.
Be like reinventing the English language every like 2 or 3 years. You have to, everybody has to relearn
a lot to keep up with.
It would be,
but it's absolutely worth it. And I mean, for anybody who doesn't know what Cliffx is pretty much a scripting language that talks directly to the back end of Ableton, the API or the live object model. So it can do stuff that Max for Live can do, but without any Max being needed. So, not to get ridiculously super nerdy, but the API / the live object model, they kind of refer to the same thing, but the way parameters and objects are identified have a slightly different nomenclature to both. But for every single element of Ableton, except for a few parameters of the looper, there's an API path that you can directly target the state or the value of like any parameter. It's going to be this track by its track number or track name, and then this device by device name or device number, and then this parameter of that device. You can get down and specify down to that last, each little bit. So Cliffx gets in and talks to all those individual parameters and has, if-then statements and can read values of things. So you can really get super deep in terms of like, if you read the live object model, does this selected clip have a clip, or is clip slot have a clip in it? If yes, create this value. And then you can use that value. Yeah. If that value equals this, then do this to this track. So it's just like, it really taught me how like Python and a lot of programming works in a big way.
Sure. Yeah. And it's actually like, once I started getting into it, I was realizing how simple it really is. Cause all you have to do is just rename a clip in session view to like change the functionality of what you want it to do.
Yep, that's like one of the simplest, easiest ways to get to it.
Yeah, or you could just, even in arrangement view, just name a locator to just have like different functionalities too. So,
which can do so many things. So you can have, when you play this clip, it mutes this other channel. Or when you play the clip, it can toggle back and forth between that. Or when the clip plays, it does one thing, and then there's a little like, naming scheme that then can make it do a different thing when the clip stops. But the clip stuff is just the surface, bro. The OSC shit and the binding stuff is like ninja level. And then what I've just started finally understanding enough to write them and work with them is the user actions, which is like straight God mode. And that's what we did with Honeycomb's thing. So like, one of the greatest things about Cliffx, in my opinion, is the OSC. So Ableton does not natively take OSC, but Python can. And therefore Cliffx, the Cliffx script itself, can be set to receive input OSC commands via a certain port, which then can trigger Cliffx actions. And this is like, honestly, one of my favorite parts of the whole thing is I can, for any new thing that I want to add to my session, create a new button on my iPad, give it a totally custom OSC name, like turn on clip 5 on track 7. Like I could name it that. Not that I probably would name it that, but I could.
That'd be a great name.
And I can go into my Cliffx script and say, hey, Cliffx, when you see that, turn on clip 5 on track 7, come in, trigger this Cliffx action. And then it's just unlimited because you're not limited to MIDI, the MIDI channels or notes or CCs. You can name it whatever you want. And it's just infinite possibilities of mapping that don't use MIDI mapping and then transfer over session to session, right? Because isn't that a big bummer with Ableton, is that MIDI mapping does not, if you save a group or a track into your user library that has mappings on it, it doesn't ask if you want to save the mappings or anything. And when you bring it into a new session, you have to go and remap stuff. With this, the OSC stuff will work no matter what. And as long as you're diligent about naming clips or tracks and devices, it'll work in any session with a track name that or a device name that or anything like that. So when it just for scalability, I can now make tracks, save into my user library, make OSC commands, and then bring them into any session, and it always works. And that is just game changing in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had somebody on the podcast a while ago talking about MIDI 2.0, and that was like kind of sparking a lot of different ideas in my head. Is like, I wonder if a lot of the OSC and some of these other languages will be replaced in a sense when 2.0 becomes more mainstream, because it does have a much higher resolution. There's so many. It's
pretty similar to OSC. Yeah. The MIDI 2.0 spec is definitely like going to open up almost as much type of control. I think it's like 1,000 channels now instead of 16. So
it's a lot. Yeah.
That's pretty much limitless. Like who's going to keep track of more than, 200,000 or whatever, 256,000 different things, right? If you have like 627 times 2 times 1,000.
Yeah.
So
I'll be curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, me too. And how it's implemented, and hopefully I would love to see OSC just natively implemented into Ableton at some point. Would go super, super far, because cool. You can also be spitting values back out, which, you can do with remote mapping.
Yep.
If you have remote in and out selected for a control surface or a MIDI controller in Ableton and map it to a toggle button, if you toggle it off in Ableton, the light on the controller will turn on or off, and they'll always be in check with each other. But with OSC, you can spit names out to labels like I have with the melody trigger thing. So that's using the bindings component. So if anybody, has used a push or an APC, those, instead of being hard mapped to this parameter of this device on this track, like the blue mapping does, it uses the API to say this knob always controls parameter 1 of the currently selected device, right? So as you select new devices, those knobs will always control what you're focused on. So Cliffx can create that same kind of functionality, but you can rebind to different parameters or different things in real time based on outcomes of other stuff. And you can be spitting out values and names and stuff like that back to a label on an iPad. So it'll tell you what the BPM is. It'll tell you what the name of the current track or scene is, or the value of a parameter, different things like that. So that's amazing for performing live, to just put notes on there when you need to see them and only see what you need in real time. Yeah. And that ability with Cliffx to do that two-way communication, and how natively and intuitively it works once you kind of get how to program in Cliffx, you can just make any value shoot back out to an iPad label with OSC. So
and the nice thing is it's not really taxing the computer at all, because it's just a part of its own native scripting language, really.
So light. It's like a little string of text, It just shoots out onto the iPad, which is fantastic. Beautiful. So I'd love to see OSC and MIDI 2.0 eventually in, natively implemented into Ableton. And curious to see how MIDI 2.0 gets, accepted into the larger sphere of stuff. But I think there's a lot of people who are waiting on that maybe don't know about OSC. Yeah. And depending on what they're trying to control, maybe what they're using doesn't accept OSC or something like that. But if it does, like, that level of control is already here.
Yeah. It's a whole new world, man. Who knows? Yeah, I got an email this morning about like the new Live 11.2 that's coming out. So 11.2 is coming very soon, which is exciting. They're redoing the reverb device. I don't know if you saw that.
The new one or the original one?
The original.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're
as long as the large space chorus still exists as it is. I love that preset on the original verb.
Yeah. I saw like a preview of the interface of what it's going to look like, and it looks really dope. They're like, I guess they're going to change the way it sounds a little bit too, redesigning some of the sound of it.
As long as it can do what it did before and cool new stuff, I'll be stoked. If we lose tried and true, sonic.
I'm sure it'll be much better. I know it's more detailed. Like, there's definitely more options with the new reverb. The
hybrid reverb's amazing.
The hybrid reverb is all I really need, to be honest with you. It's fire. Although I think it's supposed to have actually a lot of the devices, not a lot of devices, but there are a handful of devices that they have changed to be lower latency. I know that's like a big part of 0.2 is they worked on some of the latency aspect for a lot of the devices, which is great. Yeah, if we can, lower latency is always a good day.
Right, being able to put stuff through it in real time and get those effects, Take Home is going to do. Luckily, his the new M1's running at a 128 buffer, super fast. It's pretty usable. But
I love my M1.
What's that?
I love my M1. Yeah,
I don't personally have one yet, but you've had a good experience with yours. It's going quick.
It's been good. Yeah, I mean, there's certain plugins and some desktop apps that are janky just because the companies have been lazy or they haven't been able to update for whatever reason. So that's always a bummer, but everything else has been great. I haven't had really too many issues, especially with the update to Live 11.1, because they did a lot with the whole like Intel Rosetta struggles with like some of the projects and stuff. So with 11.2, it's been smooth. Oh, I just saw this. I just pulled this up. The new improvements on the reverb device for 11.2. So they have like a new setting. They have like a switchable filter type for like their diffusion network. So you can choose between one pole low pass filter or a low shelf. They improved the CPU performance, lower latency. They have a smooth new drop down menu for the reverb. So you can specify how the size parameter, so like how big the room sounds of the reverb, how it responds when it's changed using different options: smooth, none, slow, or fast, whatever that means. I don't know.
I mean, reverb can really make or break a sound. It can take a sound that's not exciting or interesting and just make it amazing and lush, or place it in space. So the more reverb tools, and especially native with Ableton, the better, because as anybody knows who's gotten deep with Ableton, if you can get away with a native Ableton device doing something, it's always the best way to go, because it's just so much lighter on the computer, so much faster. Will work in any session that you open anywhere, whether or not they have that plugin. So it's always great to stick with that. But there are times where the old reverb just wasn't hitting. You know, I was working with some client trying to match, I think, like an R-verb preset with the stock Ableton one, and it just like was close, but just never as creamy and never quite as awesome. So I was like, shit, okay, I guess we got to stick with the waves. But yeah, that's always good. If
definitely, hybrid reverb was a game changer. Or using the convolution reverb for a long time was like my go-to.
Because then it's your own signature sound in a way, right? Like if you can get your own impulses in there and stuff like that. Like,
you could record a fart and make it sound beautiful as an impulse response.
Mate, that's where most of my sound design starts, I think.
Actually, one of my good friends, Ben, he went into the Ableton whatever file, and he ended up replacing the stock default metronome sound in live to his own fart. he just
the mono neon pedal. He's got like a farting bass pedal that he's been using on shows. It's just like saw a clip of like playing with a bunch of killing cats, and he's just like stops playing bass and is just like making fart noises with everyone else is like crushing it and still straight face, and he's just like wet fart sounds coming through the PA. I was like,
I don't think he ever changed it either. I think it's probably still that way if Live 11 lets him, because like it was that way for years. He'd be tracking my drums too, and all I would hear in my ears just this. It's like, damn it, Ben. Yeah. Shout out to Ben and his metronome farts.
That's awesome. Putting that deep Ableton knowledge to use.
Yeah, innovation at its finest.
It's hilarious.
So as far as upcoming projects, you mentioned you're going on this tour. I saw that some of the stops were like Mexico. So you're going out of country. That's going to be dope. That sounds fun, man.
I can't wait. Yeah, Austin City Limits, cool. Both weekends, Mexico City, Dallas, Houston. Barbecue Belt. We're hitting the Barbecue Belt.
You have some good eating on the way, on the road.
Yeah, I'm going to need to bring my barbecue belt with a couple extra holes in it in the wrong direction.
Oh, I'm sure you'll burn it off carrying all of the gear that you're bringing as a drummer and playback.
I'm not drumming on this one, which I wish I was. Okay. Yeah, I'm just behind the scenes on it, which is a little,
that's nice.
A little hard to stomach in a way, but that's just like my attention whore tendencies. Want it,
One less thing you have to think about or carry, really.
That is true. And I mean, I love doing the behind the scenes stuff. I love producing stuff and just dealing with that and helping other people bring their show to life. So if I wasn't cool with that and I needed the attention or needed to be on stage, I wouldn't take these types of gigs. But obviously I would love and am shooting for a playback-y good gig where I am also drumming. If anybody needs one, let me know.
Yeah, but, this would be the guy. Anybody listening? I mean, you're a great drummer. You really are. From one drummer to another, you got some chops.
Likewise, bro. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So that that'll come. That will come for sure. And I already have some that I'm doing, so it's not like I haven't done any gigs like that. But this one is of another caliber. Working for quite a large, established artist, and going to some cool new spots I haven't been, and running a redundant, pretty involved rig that's going to be doing like MIDI stuff to different instruments on stage, auto tune, redundant playback, all that stuff in one. So yeah, a lot to manage, and it's going to keep me on my toes, but I'm really looking forward to,
cool.
Leveling up that way. And
yeah,
there was a moment where I was like overwhelmed or stressed for a second, just like, oh, I got to learn this whole rig and it's going to be intense. And I'm just like, I know how this stuff works. Like, yes, obviously it doesn't mean I can rest on my laurels or like relax, but there's just an inherent calm and like excitement for it that totally took over for any like stress or overthinking what I had to learn, and just being like, it's like, I know how all the components work.
Yeah.
I'm going to get there for these rehearsals and see what it is. And which I've already heard. It's like, it's good. It's a good feeling to feel like, I've kind of arrived at this point.
Yeah. Like, totally, man. I think that's true for like anything. Like the more experience you have with something, it builds more confidence, and then it becomes more fun because you're not thinking or stressing as hard about like the technical details of, okay, how do I actually accomplish this? How do I make this a reality? Because you've already done it before. And then it's just like going through the motions, and then you get to enjoy the process a little bit more. I think it's true for like producing or playback or any technical anything.
Yep. Knowing how to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Knowing how the routing is going to work and all that stuff inherently. And I'll get there and just take pictures of each station that I have to manage, whether it's the drums, MIDI setup, or the keyboards, or if there's a Kemper or something like that. Like, is it plugged in and routed? Just take simple pictures with my phone and keep them in its own folder. And I also have the Remarkable 2, which I am not endorsed by, but
I'm not familiar.
Love. It's like a e-writer kind of digital ink notebook thing that I just do all my diagrams, all my sketches. I have thousands of pages in here. What's that?
My buddy was showing that to me because like it's like a notepad, but when you write on it, it like automatically saves in the cloud.
Yep, saves in the cloud. Different folders for every project. So for every client that I've done since I've got this, I have a different folder. Just for Honeycomb's folder has a bunch of subfolders, and just the Looper project that I've been working on, there's like 35 pages that I wrote of notes and diagrams and things as I'm like working through it. And that's just one. I have like hundreds of Mad MIDI pages in here. It's everything, but I believe it. And reference them for different projects going forward. And when I show up at that tour, I'll have this, take my pictures, draw up the schematics of like whatever patching and routing each system has, and just have it right there, know it, be able to reference it. And that just honestly just helps for internalizing, just to get there and be like, I'm going to sketch out the diagram of this whole stage patch just for my own, just implanting into my brains, into my brain space. So that thing is a game changer and a lifesaver. But just knowing that's what I'm going to do, knowing what the rig is consisting of and what it has to do. Yeah. I feel great. I can't wait. I can't wait to get on the ground and just meet everybody and learn the rig and be a positive member of the crew out on tour and see some amazing new spots. And
well, they're lucky to have you. I know that much. So you mentioned auto-tune rig. I'm sure there's a handful of vocalists out there listening. Mm-hmm. What auto-tune are you using? Is this a UAD?
Yeah, it'll be UAD based. So I think it's 2 twins, maybe X8Ps or something. Most likely just twins that
for redundancy.
Yeah. So each mic, I think there's a lead mic that Benny uses, and then there's like a guest and backup mic. Those will come in, be split, and then go into both twins, right? When those signals split out, those twins will each receive IAC MIDI from the respective, they're one per computer, right? So the main computer A and computer B will each have their own twin, which then over IAC will readjust tune settings and all that stuff in parallel as they go. Those will both then feed back out to the SW8 switcher, which then whichever one of those is, if luckily, hopefully we stay on A for most of the tour, preferably A, but if it comes out of A or B, they'll be getting that post console signal coming back out to front of house. So
have you had any experiences where there was a B light that turned on stage doing playback?
Not personally, luckily, but
that's good.
Hence a decent amount of the rigs that I've done haven't been redundant just because they're smaller, independent tours, and they're not rolling with that much gear and stuff like that. But that's learning about redundancy is what led me to Laura and Transmute and Master Track and all that stuff. I got
me too.
Titus, Is that what? That's what. Yeah, exactly. Right. It was kind of like that last mysterious, like
the secret sauce of like
how do you take?
Yeah, which is actually really not that crazy or difficult, to be honest. I mean, especially if you have like an iConnect or something like that.
They changed the whole game.
Made for that. Yeah, iConnect interfaces.
I wish they were using that on this Benny rig as opposed to the SW8, but at the end of the day, it's pretty similar overall. But yeah, it's way smaller, lighter, and does what the interface, like I think this rig is going to be Motu's hard, cabled into the SW8s, because they're the pre-USB SW8s, which do work like the iConnects kind of do, where they hook up to the computer USB, you're getting virtual inputs into the rig and then spitting out analog, whereas this will be Motu's for each computer piped into the SW8s, and then you choose which one you're listening to there. So, but yeah, not knowing what gear and really how the redundant, like one MIDI controller controlling 2 sessions at the same time on 2 different controllers, because you got to split that incoming thing. If there's a drum pad on stage that the drummer's using, it needs to be sending MIDI into both sessions. So if one goes down, the other one can still hear that pad. And so, you're splitting all your incoming control MIDI, and then both computers are spitting out the same audio at the same time into a box that you can just choose which one you listen to. So
do you have like a favorite MIDI interface for that?
The iConnect stuff too.
Definitely.
The Mios are amazing. Just the flexibility, they do network MIDI, they do all, multiple inputs on each one, and just really flexible in and out port routing and filtering. You can say, hey, this port will listen to any message except this one, and stuff like that. So that's really handy for just like saving yourself in a pinch.
Yeah, for sure, man.
We'll probably use some of the Kenton stuff too, which is very much more rudimentary. It's like one MIDI comes in and it goes out twice, which is great too. Sometimes you don't need to do more than just that, but iConnect definitely all day. Yeah.
Unless you're Kanye's rig, he's probably got a lot going on and then changes his mind constantly. So
you gotta have more than redundant. You're gonna have like tridundant, quaddundant,
hexdundant. Yeah,
hexdundancy for that guy.
Probably. So that's an exciting new tour. Are you still working on any music or any like drum videos or anything?
At this point, I just fired up the Mad MIDI rig for the first time in a while today to make sure it's all working well, which it was. Yeah. And now that I have that PC, that's the thing. I've been I've been out since April, almost every single weekend gigging with a bunch of different people, learning new music, traveling around, setting up different rigs, doing new X32 profiles and stuff like that for whatever gig I have coming up. So I just have not had time to program or perform or record or edit any new stuff like that, really. Plus, my computer is just choking on Resolume and Ableton at the same time. It's just old and tired.
For sure.
So I was kind of dead in the water on that. Just got this other PC back in hand that will be more than capable of running all that stuff and like Unreal Engine really well. But at this point, I'm finishing the Honeycomb thing. Just picked up a new client that I'm pretty much is going to be like next week, just programming her live show and her playback session remotely. And then I have like a week and a half before I leave on tour. It's just like finalizing tour details, getting ready, making sure everything back home is ready for me to be gone for a little bit. So my goal is to get back from tour with enough of a bag to kind of chill for a little while and get back to new Mad MIDI with Unreal Engine, and hopefully writing some new solo tunes and just feeling free enough with my time and with, having some capital to not be stressing money or anything like that, or just jumping on any gig that comes my way. To sit there for a month or so and like get some new demos together and just like get out some of those ideas. So by the end of the year, I would say, late October into November will be the cooking. And then December into January will be the eating, the serving and the eating of the content. Here's content we cooked 3 hours ago.
Yeah, we're hungry. We want some content. Everybody wants new content.
I'm dying to do it. And that's, is one of the fundamental like realities of working in this sphere is sometimes it does just take a chunk of change. Like, your computer, which is kind of your main instrument, is like can't do what it could do 8 months ago.
Yeah.
You just got to like shell out.
Oh, dude, I feel that.
Or more on a new machine. So
been there, done that. Yeah. Well, you mentioned the computer thing. Were you running Resolume and Ableton on the same machine?
Yeah, and it was doing great for a while, but I think the
Surprising.
Ableton session got so much bigger, the OSC mappings and the Resolume session got so much bigger, and it's like a 2017, which now I know are somewhat notorious for like the casing opening up and being a little weird, and it's just like, yeah, I don't bring this one out of the house anymore. Luckily, the MacBook Air I have back here pretty much works for all like simple playback gigs, my DJ gigs, like all that kind of stuff. It couldn't handle the Mad MIDI session, but I have that able to do all like the simple utilitarian gigs, and the MacBook Pro just stays here, so it can't get compromised. But yeah, it's just probably filled with dust from having the like sides of it opened up.
There's dust bunnies just breeding in there, starting families.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exponential dust bunny breeding within the farm that is my computer. But I told myself when I got it, I was like, I'm going to just beat the shit out of this thing, doing the most I can get out of it until it can't handle anymore. And hopefully whatever I create with that will get me to the next level, which it looks like it will. And I'll come back from this tour and probably have to get a new computer of some sort.
Yeah, I did a very similar thing. I had a Hackintosh that my fart Ableton metronome friend built for me. And I ran Ableton and I ran Resolume on it, and it worked for a little bit, but it was sweating. Yep. And then there was just like certain stuff that wasn't just really working. Like Loopback was being weird on it and other stuff. So I was like, I'm not going to try to use Hackintoshing anymore. I just need like a computer that works, just a straight Mac or something.
What did you end up getting?
It was like a hybrid. It was kind of a Frankenstein. We had a Samsung SSD. I'm trying to remember what the motherboard was.
But your new one, you said you got an M1, but
the new one.
A Mac Pro, or did you get a MacBook Pro or
I got a Mac Mini. Yeah, I got the M1 Mac Mini. It was like the first gen. It came out like a year and a half ago. Is when I got it.
That's honestly what I think I want. I think I want two.
I like it.
Just two Mac Minis in a little mini Pelican case.
Yep.
That maybe have like a one screen that I can switch between which one I'm looking at, and I can do redundant, I can do audio and video, I can do playback and recording, and just have like a super flexible
Definitely, man. And you can use your iPad as a screen too, as a monitor. So I mean, and then you just plug an Ethernet cable between the two of them. They sync up, they link up really easy.
Exactly.
So, and it's small. It's a tiny little thing, smaller than the other Mac Minis.
Yep.
So
I think that's what I'm going to try to do when I get back.
No fan noise. It's great for the studio too, because there's no fan.
Unlike this thing, which probably sounds like I have a jet landing in my house right now.
Yeah, it's just blowing. It's really just a fan for you at this point, just blowing, keeping you cool.
It's kind of hot in here today. Can I run to the bathroom real quick?
Actually, I have to pee too. I'll be right back. We can wrap it up soon. Yeah. So as far as like tech stuff, are there any like new toys or like MIDI controllers or instruments or anything that you found interesting lately?
I've been out of a new gear lust phase for a while, like went hard during the beginning of COVID and stuff like that, just like getting all the little doodads I needed to either stream and do all the, lighting and all that kind of stuff. And then once gigs were on the horizon again like that, there was definitely a few things I got to like not have to take parts off my other. So I did a lot of buying another version of something. Like I got an X32 rack, so I don't have to bring the main one out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Got a little simple but awesome like Gretsch Catalina club kit that I found that was used allegedly. It looked like the dude had never touched it in his life.
That's awesome.
Got that easily for bringing out. Yeah, I love that thing. So not really that way, but because I'm on this Touch OSC and now with the user actions and Cliffx, like that is my new sauce right now. Because that was one thing I wanted to mention before with the user actions. I can now write fully customized Cliffx actions. And by knowing how to read that API pretty proficiently now and having some good, mentors to help kind of look through existing user actions and understand them, I now feel like the sky is the absolute limit. I can think of any logic-based kind of functions in Ableton that I need and make them from scratch. So I can just make my own new shit. That was one of the things we did for Honeycomb. I needed an action that would if in the currently selected clip slot, it's like a list of little micro commands that it does to create this new action, which I named skip if clip, or skip to empty is what I ended up calling it, which when I use that Cliffx bracket skip to empty, it will look at the currently selected clip slot, index the number of the slot and the scene number, say, does this have a clip in it? If not, record a new clip at this variable clip, length variable that's been predetermined. And if there is a clip, jump to the next empty clip. If you're on track 1 and 3 over have clips, it'll jump to track 4 or whatever. So it'll always find the next blank one on the same scene and then start recording. So Honeycomb can literally hit one button and do it. And that's the cool. Ability to think of what it needed to do and then figure out how to write it with the API and the back end of Cliffx with a user action. That's, as I said, like God mode now. So just being able to think of any wild, crazy Ableton functionality, program it with that, and then make a custom control on my iPad for it. That's my new toys and new sauce, really.
That's so dope. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's the one I'd reference there for sure. And then Unreal, now that I have this PC back in hand with the crazy RTX 6000 graphics card in it and crazy amounts of Threadripper, now I can really dig into Unreal and trying to use that in new and creative ways for my own show and for other people's too.
That's really cool, man. Yeah, I think when I start playing shows in the near future, right now I'm just in writing mode, I might hit you up at some point to just pick your brain on some Cliffx looping. Because I've run into a few different hurdles that I think you probably can figure out within a few seconds.
I got you. Yeah, anything I can do to help. Whether you're looping audio or looping incoming MIDI. Both of them, yeah.
Most likely audio. It'll probably be all audio. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, man. I got you. Because there's some fundamental things about Ableton that make looping without the looper, without Cliffx, very weird, and that you can't overdub onto an audio clip, which I get is because the non-destructive audio model behind Ableton is fundamental to the way it works, but is a little tricky when you want to I just want to add another layer to this fixed length looping piece of audio. So we've overcome that with that custom skip to empty action, but we can definitely help customize whatever
that would be sick
functionality that you want, or anybody listening wants, by the way.
That's right. Anybody out there, you have no excuse not to find out from this guy.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
Speaking of audio, there's this new toy. I saw Andrew Huang just posted a video about it today, so I think they probably sponsored him too. But
Vocalia?
Yeah, Vocalia. Have you played with these?
I haven't been hands-on with it. We had the original. Is that the new one?
This is the 2. Yeah, this is the new one.
The one the person, I forget the homie from the company, but came and did a Transmute session, and the first one was amazing, but I heard the second one is like crazy. We kind of want to get that into Honeycomb's rig too at some point.
I was going to talk to him about that, and definitely, like, you should definitely play with it. I think he would love it. It has some good pre-built sounds into the standalone app.
Yep.
And it definitely just works really well with the standalone app, but it also works really well as a MIDI. Obviously, the latency is very low. I was surprised because I played with the first gen because my buddy bought it and I played with it, but second gen is definitely much faster. It's more intuitive. Like the actual pitch bending between notes, I feel like is a lot smoother. Right. So there's a lot of advantages, I think, for the second gen.
Multiple commands that can come out for a sound too, right? Like, it can send a note to trigger a sample, but it also like do a macro list of actions, or at least trigger a CC or an action or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. So like I could
by doing a certain sound or something, right? Yeah.
So if I'm singing into this mic, then I could have it playing like Serum or whatever, and I could have one track. I could send out separate CC values. Like one value could be for the chord tab in the standalone, so it'll play out chords, and I can predefine like to only sing within a certain key. And then it also has a feature in the chords tab in the standalone app to also do following bass notes. So you can send out a separate CC into the chord section. It'll follow the chord, but it'll also play a bass line separate out into a different track that you could record, which is really cool too.
I remember reading something explaining that, and like, oh my God, the possibilities.
There's so many things.
His beatboxing are very vocally based.
That's kind of what I'm working on right now, and that's a big reason for the live looping is the audio aspect. If I just wanted to use the sound straight out of the standalone, because I don't want to run a bunch of plugins inside of my Ableton session if I don't have to, then, I could do the beatboxing, loop it, just start layering that. And I think Honeycomb he's already doing that kind of stuff, but it's not really audio to MIDI.
Way, yeah. I mean, that articulation, that level of control, and getting, MIDI values and data right off the vocal performance without needing to post-process and do like audio to MIDI to then scale it to this within Ableton is massive. So
yeah, or people who
make a script for it, make something like anytime you see this note or value come in from Vocalia, like do this to the session. So
yeah. This Dubler too is a cool mic. Another thing that I just got in the mail, it's been like Christmas lately, dude. I've been getting all these new toys. This Wave Ring by Genki.
Oh, Genki, yep.
Yeah, this thing's dope. I was playing with this the other day. I posted a little video on Instagram.
What's it like to drum with it? That's the thing. I haven't seen any drummers with it before, but I thought
haven't. There's so many things you could do because it has 3 buttons on it. So you could use one for capture. I know DaVinci does that. I saw a tutorial video of him doing that. One button could be capture. You could hit stop, play, record. You could have it trigger a clip that has a command in Cliffx to do whatever else you wanted, obviously.
This over a filter, a filter. Synth, but then you're drumming, like the division of your hi-hat would be that,
yeah, exactly, dude. Even just like, because my drum set's like across the room too. So just even for recording, I mean, it's kind of a game changer. You could record that filter automation in. Or just hit stop and start, record. So yeah, this thing's really fun. I'm really a huge fan of this.
Make a vid of you like doing, like if you get that, sending CCs into the computer, out to your Moogs, filter CC or something like that, and just like a note, hold on.
Yeah.
And wop, 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 like that. That'd blow up too.
Exactly. That's my plan. I have a buddy who's coming out here from LA who's really good with video. And I think we're going to probably play with some of these toys and see what kind of weird video we can come up with.
Sick.
Question is just finding time to actually work on that.
Yeah, that really is. That's the one thing that's the hardest to get.
Yeah.
Get more of it.
If you figure out how to time travel, please let me know.
I'm working on it. That's a next user action that I'm
next.
I will shout out one cool piece of gear that's a little similar to that, which is the Proximity from Copper and Cedar, the homie Ruben Dax. It's like this, it looks like a little wooden kind of hockey puck shaped thing with an IR sensor in it that can do, like theremin style controls or CCs or parameter touchless. Ooh. And what I'm using it for, it's down next to my Moog. So when I'm streaming, when I reach down to tweak something on the Moog, it sees my hand. And as long as it's on and sending a CC, it switches to an insert shot in OBS. So that CC comes into Ableton, gets turned into a keystroke that is held down as long as the thing is sending a value. So I can get an insert shot of what I'm doing down on my synth. And as soon as I take my hand away, the shot goes away. So it's using it just to visually see my hand, which is like amazing for, not having to switch cameras or do anything like that in OBS, but still getting shots only when I need them. And I think we're going to do that with Honeycomb at some point too, is have a few of those around his rig. Because he wants to get a live video behind him of what he's kind of doing with his setup. And if he's got a couple of those proximities that will only see his hand when he's on this synth or on this drum pad, it'll pretty much be directing the video shoot for him based on just what he's doing. So yeah, got to shout out the Copper and Cedar Proximity.
How much do those run?
It's like less than $100. I think he's selling for like $85 or something. They're like handmade, like beautiful wood. I would grab mine, but it's kind of like mounted in there in the perfect spot. So, maybe drop a link in or something.
How do you run that into a scene like in OBS? I'm just curious. Like, does it have?
So I have it set to send you can set it to a note or a CC or even a scale, right? Which is cool for controlling synths and stuff like theremin style.
Yeah.
So it sends a CC, which goes, I have a channel in Ableton that listens track in on from the Proximity. That just literally sends that CC straight back out into a network session that goes to my OBS streaming computer and then comes into Bohms on there, which turns it into a keystroke, which is a toggle on-off hotkey for that inserted shot in OBS. So as long if the proximity is sending any value, aka sees my hand, it acts like that keystroke is just being held down. As soon as it's gone, it goes away. So it's like pretty smart. Simple by our standards.
Yeah, I mean, but it makes sense. I mean, if you know the basic of how to use bombs, setting up a keystroke is not hard.
Right, just sees that CC, turns it into a keystroke, which is the only thing for anybody who doesn't use OBS or isn't super familiar. Is the only mapping in OBS currently is with keystrokes instead of if OBS just accepted MIDI.
Yeah,
I could just have the thing plugged right into the streaming computer and doing that.
Kind of shocking that they don't.
Right? Yeah, it's a little weird.
It is a little weird.
But it's open source and
it's free. Yeah, it's free, so you can't complain too much.
To implement, so I understand, and luckily this works well enough that way. So have as the insert to Moog under the table Moog insert shot, which is pretty. I was gonna try to do it with an Arduino and like make a an IR sensor thing and do all the programming, but Ruben Dax, who is Copper and Cedar, created this beautiful all-in-one unit with its great little editor, and worked perfectly. So
that's awesome. I did something kind of similar, sort of. I just took my Launchpad and I basically turned it into a Stream Deck by doing the same thing and having keystrokes in bombs sending into Resolume. Yeah, because I didn't want to pay like $200 for another one.
Yeah, Stream Decks are very cool, and there's a few things that they do on their own that is like it can be directly mapped to scenes in OBS, which I don't understand how that does that and like nothing else does. But beyond just that function, it's almost recreatable with like other MIDI controllers or free stuff. So props on the retrofit there, the retrofit Stream Deck functionality.
Thanks, appreciate that. Yeah, there's like, I don't know, endless things we could probably continue to talk about. The video side of things is interesting to me. I'm learning more about, so I'm setting up a studio. I'm looking at a couple places in Denver right now to do in-person podcasts. Yeah. And so I'm looking at video switchers and trying to make it so like, okay, how can I do less post-production? And how can I just make it as simple as possible so I don't have to do more work later? Doing video follows audio. There's a Roland, I think it's VH1, that does that pretty well. It's just like a little box, and so like when somebody's talking, it automatically just does camera switches for you.
That's fire.
So I'm looking at that. It's like $650 or so. There's other ones out there that can do too.
Right, if you just had an audio to MIDI Max for Live device, which is free, included with the suite, on a channel that says, take as soon as you see audio, create this note, or it would be any number of notes, but then you could put it into a scale device. So any of the notes that it spits out when it hears your voice coming in turn into just one note that then come out of the channel, turn into a keystroke for that person's scene in OBS, so that you can then just make the different channels that listen to the different mics turn into their own individual notes to their own keystrokes, and boom. Anytime someone's talking in, it'll trigger that really output MIDI and do that. So, and you already have the bombs to that going, right?
That's true. I love your brain. It's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Save yourself $650.
Exactly. That's a good point. Wait, so
that whole workflow of not wanting to deal with a ton of post-production was like a huge part of why I wanted to get this whole system kind of figured out, so that camera switches are happening automatically. The mix is all getting done in real time in the board and getting baked in with the video, but I can still multi-track record if I do need to go back and save something or triage it. All the lighting is happening right there. And I can pretty much at this point, I have to turn everything on and get it all fired up. But once I do that, I'm making, even if I'm not streaming it in real time, I'm just recording pretty much a finished video product right there into OBS, which is just so much better than sitting around syncing it up and editing it and dealing with all that, which is
ain't nobody got time for that. Eventually we'll just have AI that does all that for us. We'll just be like, hey, I want you to edit this video and make it dope.
yes, master. That'll be the best once you can just prompt it the way you can do with the art now.
That's the dream. Yeah. Have you tried that? Have you tried any AI art stuff?
A few. Yeah. Honeycomb was doing it at his house when I was there, and we put a couple prompts into it. I gotta get back to it, and try. I feel like I always have the best ideas when I'm like driving and can't write it down or do anything, and like forget when I like could try it. But
true. Yeah. There's one. It's a Discord server called Midjourney. Have you heard of that one? Yeah.
Yep.
That's the one I played with. It's actually really cool. Works really
That's
well.
the one he was using too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really popular right now.
Then there's the DAW or whatever, but that's like the invite only one or something, right?
Oh, it's
but
super exclusive.
Smarter. Yeah, exactly. So
VIP. Yeah. You have to like buy an NFT of an ape or something to get in.
You're not hearing as much about these NFTs these days.
Yeah, you're really not. It got a lot quieter.
People aren't talking about them all the time anymore, but we'll see.
I don't know, man. I think it's all so new. It'll take a while for people to kind of adopt technology that's very foreign to the average person, you know?
Right. I don't want that statement I just made to age like milk. So I'm not anti-NFT. I'm just not super in on like making them and trading them and selling them yet to the point where.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. I think it's a cool concept. I've got other things I'm saving money for other than NFTs at this point in my life, but that'll probably change at some point. I have a couple, but
I feel like the Mad MIDI and making unique performance video clips that like this one moment of this one performance, which is totally unique on its own, could be turned into one and make my own that way. So I'm trying to get to that point once again, having this PC and having some serious graphics card firepower around could help expedite that process. So
that'd be dope.
Not ruling it out. Another idea I had for one was literally just like take the Mad MIDI pages, like the hundreds of pages that I have in here, export them as like their individual PDFs, make it an NFT that if printed out would be like the side of a house, like big enough to fill like all that. And it's also the entire roadmap to Mad MIDI. But you know, you buy it that way and like.
That'd be kind of cool.
$500,000. Idea. Great deal.
$500,000.
Great deal. That's half off.
Yeah, that is. That's a good idea. You could buy 3 of them.
Exactly.
Why not? Give them to your friends.
Stocking stuffer.
It'd be a stocking stuffer.
A digital stocking, of course.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, in the metaverse, it would be a nice stocking. It would be on a fireplace and a mantle.
Design you an NFT of a stocking. You could stuff it in there.
Right. You just imagine the warm glow of the fireplace next to the stocking. Yeah. It's been awesome hanging out with you, man, and catching up. I have to head out, and I know we've been going on time for a while. It's been
2 hours.
Like 2 hours, dude. That doesn't happen all the time. That's when you know it's a good episode.
Hell yeah. Anybody who's made it this far.
That's right, dude. Yeah, keep me updated, and if you ever come through the Denver hood, definitely hit me up.
I'll be back out there.
Good. Yeah, I'll buy you a drink or food or whatever, and
yeah, let's do a show or something. Once I can bring Mad MIDI back out on the road, which I will be able to do with this PC and getting my stuff back together like early, next spring before college is done or something like that
that'd be sick.
Yeah, definitely. Let's chat about getting some co-bills or something like that going on. I'd love that.
For sure. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm a lot of venues in Denver, so I'm sure people would love to see you play out here.
I love being out there. I used to come out there and play with that band, the Indo Box, a good amount. And the music scene. My buddies, La Special, have been out there crushing it on the regular. They just did Red Rocks with Humphreys a couple months ago.
Oh, dope. Yeah.
So.
I actually had tickets to that show. Somebody gave me, and I didn't make it. But
for La Special.
Yeah. Humphreys is classic.
Yep.
Throwback.
Yeah. Those are my homies. Humphreys dudes are good guys too, but La Special are some of my oldest boys, and go back with them homies cutting our teeth in the woods of New England back when we were 15, 16 years old playing house parties. And it's awesome to see what they're up to and on the rise. And just the Colorado music scene loves them and is just a great spot. So you're in a great place for that.
I feel that, jealous, man.
Hopefully they'll be back sooner than later.
Yeah, dude, come. You just have more friends out here to come visit. So Denver's a beautiful scene, man. It's so beautiful, and like it's easy to stay inspired. I think when you're in a good music community. So it was excited to be here. So come hang, come visit.
I will.
Yeah, the weed is very strong. And
I barely puff anymore, man. I do sometimes when my back hurts, but I finally graduated like old man status, or like hit of herb, I'm like wasted.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I got to be careful out here. I'm trying to be productive, so got to cut yourself off at some point.
Yeah, it's like maybe one before bed at this point. If I was to smoke herb in the day is done. The day is ruined for me at this point, which is back in the day.
Yeah,
was not always the case.
That's true. Yeah.
Good to be in touch with your, the realities of your limitations are just like, that's not helping. That's not helping anymore. So it's good.
Part of the problem is caffeine's not as helping as much as it used to either.
I just drink twice as much. I think I've had like 5 coffees today, hence how we've gone for 2 hours.
Problem solved.
I'm in the episode of Futurama where Fry's just like in super slow motion, like running around.
That's such a good show.
Love it.
My God.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, wait, before we jump off, where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to like hit you up online or something?
I'd say Instagram at Jules Jenssen, JulesJenssen, or email me, julesjenssen@gmail.com. I'm barely going Facebook anymore because it's just depressing and triggering and gross and pretty much mostly boomers.
I feel that way about Twitter without the boomers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Twitter's just overwhelming. I have one, but I like don't really use it yet. But I should. And the TikTok I had, and then I deleted it off my phone in Electric Forest, so I had space to take photos, and I haven't put it back on yet. But then they were like, "It's a huge security breach," and I was like, "Is it worth the fame that I won't get?" Like, I don't know. So, hit me on Instagram or email me for now, folks. I'm reachable.
Yeah, maybe TikTok someday. I'll include all those links in the show notes, everybody. So just go down there and click it. Follow Jules. Dude, good catching up with you. If you see Robert on tour, tell him Dan says hi.
Yeah, I'm going to actually literally make a note to hit up Trusco right now.
Dude, you should. I'm sure he'd love to see you.
Trusco. Yeah, we've definitely kept in touch periodically, but would love to catch him in person and hang down there.
Yes, sir.
There.
Maybe you can exploit him for some good bass loops and record him while you're down there.
The best bass loops.
Yeah, for sure. All right, dude. Well, take it easy, man. It's good seeing you as always.
Can't wait to hear it and see it and share it around when it's out. And do a part 2 at some point.
In person, for sure.
Yes, agreed.
So, yeah, we'll nerd out hard. All right, man. Take it easy.
Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you. You too, dude. Have a good tour.
Thank you, brother. I'll see you later.
Peace. Later. Yo, thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. Make sure you give Jules a follow, subscribe, comment on all of his stuff. Once again, if you don't hate the podcast, please leave a review wherever you're listening. And if you want to hang out, connect with me, ask questions, whatever, join the Discord. Go to liveproducersonline.com/Discord. We'd love to meet you there. And yeah, if you want to join the newsletter, go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Check back on Tuesdays for new episodes, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.